Hi, everybody. Welcome to Your Life Projectized. Today is episode number 31. Recently, I've been messing up my episode number, so please excuse me. But today's episode number 31. And today's episode title is called Precision Under Pressure, Project Management in Pharma and Biotech. And we haven't covered this subject before, so I'm really excited to not just discuss this subject, but to introduce you to my very special speaker today. And that gentleman's name is Dr. Rajinder Parti. Dr. Rajinder Parti has a lot of experience in the pharma and biotech space. And I'm not going to go too much into detail. I'm actually going to pass it over to him. So, Rajinder or sorry, Dr. Parti ji, and I'm so sorry. Why don't you introduce yourself? Tell the audience a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do.
Thank you, ma'am. And I'm so excited to be participating in this podcast. Where should I start from? It has been a long journey, and I was always interested in science and research. So, uh, what I did my PhD from India, and then I came to the US on a postdoctoral fellowship. So
Oh,
I was actively involved in research in the area of cell and molecular biology. I enjoyed what I was doing at that point of time. And then after that, I joined industry, uh, part industry, part academia, and I was still doing research. But slowly at that point of time, I moved into project management aspect of research. And that actually excited me. So I thought, why not formalize it? And I got PMP certified. And I'm talking about sometime between 2010, 2015. And because at that time I was managing many early stage R&D programs
mhm.
on vaccine research, and I was working with multiple teams. And after that, I formally entered in industry into that area, company industry, and they. I don't know if the audience is familiar. Especially, there is a sponsor organization in pharma,
Mhm.
and then there is CDMO. So that company was a CDMO, and I started working as a project manager there. And the technology area was LNP, and most of the people know this technology because of COVID vaccine. So mRNA was
Yeah.
a molecule there working as a drug. So after that, I worked on different technologies, worked as a project manager in different organizations, different companies. So overall, I have been in biotech and pharma for more than 25 years. All
Wow.
along, it had been a very interesting journey, a mix of research and project management. Because I have that scientific background, it really helps me manage programs, manage portfolios. It's not only about the execution of programs, it's also about a strategic mindset
Yeah.
that you approach each program with that and that yeah, overall it's been a very exciting journey, and I would definitely encourage uh, youngsters who are still kind of in the middle of the decision making whether they should take up project management in biotech or not. I would encourage them that they should definitely they can carve out a very good career out of it.
Wow, and thank you so much for saying that because I myself don't have any experience with project management in this particular space, but I thank you very much for mentioning that because I think it is great great for individuals to also look at this industry because I know in project management we hear a lot about project management in construction. We hear a lot about project management in healthcare, et cetera. And of course, it's pharma, so it is still healthcare, but maybe not specifically, but so maybe not as specific. So we say healthcare I don't in a broad way, but I appreciate the fact that you are specifying pharma and biotech, and I definitely agree with you. I think for any up and coming project managers, I think this is a great field to look into. And so, Rajinder ji, and by the way, for the audience, you guys probably notice I keep saying G at the end, or Dr. Parti ji, and I'm so sorry, but Dr. Parti ji, for the audience members. You may notice I keep saying G at the end. So that is because Dr. Parthi ji and I are from the same community. We are both from the Sikh community. And so G is just a way of showing respect. And so I definitely want to ensure that I'm showing full respect to Dr. Parthi ji. So that said, Dr. Parthi ji, I have a quick question. So you mentioned your background, which is, by the way, so very impressive. Dr. Partiji, did you also do, and I'm so sorry if you mentioned this as you were introducing yourself, but did you also do pharma and biotech when you were in India?
Yes, I worked
Okay.
in a drug research institute. I got my PhD from that institute. So, but it
Okay.
was more on the discovery side, on the research side. Uh,
Okay.
so broadly, if you talk about pharma or biotech, uh, you start with discovery, you start with research, right? And then you
Yeah.
come up with a molecule of interest or a drug target of interest or a drug candidate. So
Mm-hmm.
then it goes into from discovery, it enters the development phase. So then you start developing it, and there are multiple stages within development, both on the technical side, you develop the product, and also on the clinical development side. So you start your research development studies, you start working on trials, and you see the efficacy, the safety and efficacy of the molecule of the drug candidate.
Mm-hmm.
And once you get the positive results, there are different stages. And once the results are positive, then you start filing for that drug product. So, yeah, so talking about the different phases of clinical development, there is phase one, two, from phase one to phase three or phase four. And but before you start those trials, you
Mm-hmm.
have to submit an application to a regulatory agency. So in US, it's FDA, and in Europe, there is EMA,
Okay.
European Medicine Agency. So these are just few examples. And then there is an agency in Japan and in China, in different countries, they have different health authorities. So you're submitting application there to get permission or approval before you start the trials.
Okay.
So you will be approaching those organizations only when you are ready with a drug product that you feel confident about and you have sufficient data. Uh, and you submit that data, you apply, and then once the approval is granted, you start the trials. And especially in the first two phases of trials, you look for safety. And from second or phase or third phase, definitely that you start looking for efficacy of that drug product. So once, as I said, if you have sufficient results from those clinical development studies to prove that your drug product uh, is both safe and efficacious, effective against
Mm-hmm.
the disease that you're targeting, then you file another application for the registration of the drug product so that you can commercially launch the product and you can start selling it. So
Mm.
that's the last step. But again, the project is not over. I mean, it changes hands, right, from one group to another, and then the commercial group takes over, and then that's the later part of the product life cycle, and then you have to maintain a steady supply, and then you still monitor how the patients are responding to that drug product. So it's a long product life cycle, starting from discovery to development to manufacturing, production, commercial production, launching of the product, and then keeping that maintaining that drug product in the market, and still monitoring, still collecting
Mm.
data.
Very interesting. And so, and what it sounds like is, Dr. Partiji, it sounds like it. So obviously there are some, it's nuanced, and there are some very glaring, in my opinion, differences between doing project management, maybe in pharma and biotech. Going with the trials, the testing the efficacy of the product on a patient and things like that. But are there any other differences other than so? And you mentioned the life cycle, and I know even in project management, when you're talking about software development, we also go through a somewhat similar life cycle. But are there any other differences that you so ha with your experience, are there any other differences in being a project manager and let's say, and I know you haven't worked in construction, you haven't worked in maybe digital marketing. So it may be hard for you to answer this, but are there differences that you are aware of in, other than the ones that you already mentioned, in pharma and biotech as a project manager compared to other industries?
I come from, yeah, I can answer that question, but before I answer that more specifically, I just want to tell you about what I have learned in my career because I spent considerable significant amount of time in research. So research, what I noticed, right, it's a continuous journey.
Yeah,
You start with a question, you start looking for answers, and then you run experiments, you design experiments, then that helps you answer your queries. I'm just putting it very simply. So it's
yeah,
a continuous process. And when you talk about projects, you talk about specific start and end. You start with you already have an objective defined. Okay, this is when we'll say the project has ended. This is our objective. This is our goal, and we have met. So start and end is very important when we talk about programs or projects, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's not that very clear in research programs. It keeps moving. You keep extending it or diversifying. So doing project management in academia, in research, in academic research is a different ballgame. You
Okay.
have, but when I joined industry, when I entered this industry, pharma slash biotech industry, I was expecting that it will be more defined, and it is defined. But again,
Hmm.
uh, keeping that in a proper perspective, we just talked about a product life cycle in pharma, but again, it can be broken down into multiple projects,
Okay.
multiple programs, and with different teams, altogether different teams, and it changes hands. So the projects do start and end at particular time, and those projects fall under the umbrella of program, and different programs make a portfolio. So it
Yep,
is very
yep.
much in sync with what we are told and in the standardized way of doing things by PMI or other project management organizations. So it fits in that definition.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So now, how is it different from an IT project or a construction project? Uh, I can say that we are more agile. We need to be more agile,
Okay.
very
Hmm.
flexible. Suddenly, we have to pivot to an entirely new direction based on the feedback we get from regulatory agency. Suddenly, and it's not only the health authorities. There are triggers that we get from the company. The strategy changes, but I think that applies to other sectors as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And then, and something else, you were talking a little while ago, you were talking about a continuous improvement, right?
yeah.
And so, and how, so take me through. So, right, so I'm a patient myself. And as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, if we do a clinical trial on this medication, and let's say your project team knows, okay, this medication is working, but maybe it is not the best medication. Or maybe we need to, and again, I'm not in your field, so I'm probably not using the right medical terminology, but what does that process look like to improve that? Because I'm purely asking it mainly out of a not necessarily a project management standpoint, but from a curiosity standpoint. So what does that process look like?
Yeah, so as the drug candidate moves through the different phases of clinical development, uh,
Mm-hmm.
you may get data that you were not expecting,
Okay.
and it's not as promising as you were expecting it to behave or show. Uh, and there is something called comparative intelligence. So the company keeps getting information from what its competitors are doing,
Mm-hmm.
what drugs are there in the market, and also what drugs they are working on. Because there are multiple platforms where you can get this information from. Based on that, and and the data that you are getting on your own product, companies may make a strategic decision of discontinuing a program. Okay, we were expecting this therapy to be a first line therapy, but the current first line therapy has a much stronger data, is much more efficacious compared to what our drug candidate will be, because our drug candidate's data is not as promising.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So the direction of the program changes, and sometimes they dismantle it or slow it down, or maybe they think of um, using it as a combination product or as a part of, yeah, combination product, or maybe using it in conjunction with another therapeutic product. So those decisions are made uh, based on uh, several other things, including comparative intelligence and yeah.
Okay, and so and thank you so much for that explanation. I think that's very helpful. And I'm wondering, so as you were talking, I'm thinking to myself, so I'm going to describe a situation. So, and because I've seen this a lot. So again, as a patient, I've seen this a lot where a medication, so the clinical trials were done, and it was found that this medication is effective in treating, well, I'll just throw something out there, headache. Let's say it's effective for treating headaches. But now, as you continue in this life cycle, you will and gotten feedback from patients and health practitioners, you've discovered that not only does this help with headaches, but this also solves another issue that you didn't necessarily test for this specific issue, but it's also good for this. So I'm assuming that this now would go through another life cycle of testing. So would
Yeah.
I be correct in saying that?
Yes, yeah, this happens. And maybe in the first round of trials, that was not the primary indication, but
Okay.
based on the patient data, they think, okay, it may be tested for another indication. And but then they have to start the enrollment again, and they have to uh, start another study with a different set of objectives. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, very interesting. And thank you again. Thank you so very much for that explanation. I think that's incredibly helpful. And so you also talked, Dr. Partiji, you also talked about some of the different teams that you work with, right? So when you are working with some of those cross-functional teams, so right, scientists, clinical staff, regulatory folks, and business, as they're working together, what role does the project manager, so let you being the project manager, what role would you play in keeping all of those individuals aligned?
Yeah, lately I've been working a lot with technical teams which focus more on the CMC side of things in
Okay.
pharma. It's chemistry, manufacturing, and controls. So it's the quality aspect of the manufactured product. So the teams are involved in developing the product, developing the process,
Mm-hmm.
and then manufacturing the product, and controlling the quality of the product, quality control. So there are different teams, process development teams, manufacturing teams, technology transfer teams, quality control team, analytical development teams that work on developing and qualifying methods for the testing of the product. Then
Mm-hmm.
there are regulatory teams which are actually taking care of submissions and responding to queries from regulatory authorities. And there are supply chain teams which take care of supplying the drug product to the clinical sites where the patients are dosed. So, and maybe I'm missing out on some other teams, but these are the main teams, and they
Okay.
are part of a cross-functional product team. And as a project manager, if you're managing a program,
Mm-hmm.
you are interacting with all those team members. You're pulling all of them together, getting information, getting inputs on the progress of the program. Now, each function is doing what they know is best within their function, and the information is there. So, but the linkages are needed across different functions. So, establishment and maintenance of those linkages is what a
Mm-hmm.
project manager does.
Okay.
So, basically, it's about
Mm-hmm.
facilitating communication at the right time, at the right level, because at this in this age there is too much of information. So I would say you are a good project manager if you're facilitating communication, but you should also know what to communicate. You
Yes.
should be bombarding everybody with the minutest details uh, of each function, right? So that sense should be there. What is relevant to the program, relevant to the efficient running of the program. So
Mm-hmm.
that role is played by a project manager. So facilitating communication and then conflict resolution also at times. Because when there are different functions working together, sometimes there are different ways of looking at things. So all you have to do is get them together and help in decision making. So
Yeah.
decision making is also very important, and project manager plays a very important role in facilitating decision making. And also, in addition to that, uh, decision making, I you know, there are different ways of arriving at decisions because there are multiple changes happening
Mm-hmm.
in this drug development sector. Uh, the role of leadership is also very important. So
Yeah.
you get inputs, constant requests. So the team has to respond very fast. In that aspect, project manager plays the role of a leader, takes the entire bunch with him or herself and steers the team in the right direction. And we do lots of scenario planning.
Yeah.
So if we have been asked to accelerate the program by 6 months or 1 year, or accelerate the filing or submission, then definitely we need teams inputs, cross-functional teams inputs, and we have to actively manage the risk. Because if you are coming up with scenario, let's say on an accelerated timeline, so the risks will get elevated. So mitigation also becomes very important. All that discussion, everything, all that is actually led by a project manager. So
Yeah.
it's also on your shoulder. So effective project management is a must. It's a day-to-day job, and it's a very essential job. And it's not a very monotonous journey. It's very interesting, but
Yeah.
every day is a new day, and it comes with a new set of challenges.
Yeah. Definitely, definitely. And you know what there's so I'm glad you mentioned that because my next question, well, the next thing I wanted to know was around risk management. But before I get into that, I love that you mentioned the feedback loop and how giving the different stakeholders, the different team members, an opportunity to consistently and constantly provide feedback. So I love that you mentioned that because I think that is also critically important. And I also love again, the focus on communication because communication is so important. I've said this now several times on the different podcast episodes that I've hosted. Right, PMI says communication is 90% of what a project manager does. So I really appreciate you mentioning communication because again, vitally important. And so Dr. Partiji, so again, you talked a little bit about risk management, and I'm so glad you mentioned that because that was actually one of the first things that was at the top of my mind when we actually started this conversation. So of course, we recognize, right, especially in drug development, risk management is critical. But you mentioned you mentioned a risk already, but what other unique risks do you think that project managers need to manage in this particular space?
If there are multiple risks, so if you talk about technical risk, definitely
Hmm.
each function has its own sets of risks, and but at a more generalized level, we talk about timeline, we talk about compliance. When
Hmm.
we submit our applications to health authorities, we should be in compliance with all the necessary controls, and we should be aligning our work with the guidance documents. And so that is something to watch out for.
Hmm.
Uh, and just in order to do an accelerated submission, we should be ignoring that aspect, which is very important from the approval standpoint and from the patient's safety perspective as well.
Hmm.
Yeah. So
Okay.
the quality, product quality should not suffer and
Of
should not
course.
come at the cost of submitting the application faster. Yeah. So also, um, cost is very important.
Yeah.
So I know, so that part is also very important, and the resource usage is also to be taken care of. And there are multiple risks, and so yeah, so each program is unique.
Sure, sure. Yeah. I really like that you talked about quality, right? Particularly because what you do, it directly impacts patients, right?
Yeah,
And if you're not focusing on quality, there is a direct effect on the patients, even as far as a patient potentially losing their life.
yeah.
So really appreciate you appreciate you mentioning that. And so Dr. Parthijean, I know we're getting close to the end of our time, so but I just have a couple more questions for you. So as we see innovation accelerate, right, in the life sciences, right, the mRNA that you mentioned earlier, AI is now, of course, huge, right? AI in drug discovery. How is the project manager's role evolving to keep up with some of these changes? So keep up with some of this innovation.
Yeah, I think most of the companies are encouraging their employees to leverage AI to the fullest. And currently, there is much to be done. I know most of the project managers in pharma sector and biotech have started using AI for meeting minutes, setting agendas, and
Yeah,
capturing meeting minutes, and they are really doing a very great job. And also in preparing presentations, and
yeah,
I really love that aspect. Actually, it's making things more efficient. But AI can do much more than uh, what project managers are currently using AI for. Uh,
yeah.
we see a potential, and there is a discussion around uh, coming up with novel AI tools to use in submissions, in regulatory submissions, and to leverage historical knowledge, which is already sitting in the organization. And we can definitely use AI to leverage that historical knowledge to
Hmm.
our advantage and make our processes far more efficient.
Yes.
So that is another area that I think pharma and biotech world um, can go in, and I think they will be definitely because I see more and more AI tools coming up, and it's all about introducing efficiency, and AI is very much helping. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I'd also seen, I mean, in the healthcare sector where AI is even being used to, so you put into a closed AI, something like whether it's Microsoft Copilot or, and there's several of different ones, right? I could a practitioner maybe putting in that this is my patient. These are some of the symptoms of this patient. This is the drug that I'm considering prescribing, and even asking AI, the input being a question, this is the drug, this is what the patient's already experiencing, this is, but is there something, are there potential drug interactions that I should be aware of that I have not considered? And so I definitely think that AI is going to be is helpful and continues to be helpful. And I think as you mentioned, I don't think we even recognize just yet the full capacity of what AI is able to do. So I really love you mentioning that. And so, Dr. Parthi, so I ask, so I know we're at the end of our session, but there's a question that I ask each of my guests, which has nothing to do with project management. Well, technically, I guess it kind of has something to do with project management. I ask each of my guests, if you were not in the role that you are in, when you were a little boy, actually, let me backtrack. When you were a little boy, what did little Dr. Parthi, or you weren't yet a doctor, right? What did Rajinder ji want to be when he grew up?
I always wanted to be a scientist. Yeah. And if I go back far back, maybe I wanted to be an astronomer.
Really?
Yeah, I used to be mesmerized by stars, looking at the sky and looking at stars and all. And I remember I was at that point of time, maybe I was in grade 2 or 3. I started buying books uh,
Yeah.
on astronomy, started reading books about that. So maybe I would have delved into that area.
Oh,
Yeah.
lovely, lovely. Wow, I didn't know that about you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Uh, so, I thank you again, Dr. Parthi, for today's session. Lovely to not only get your insights as a professional in pharma and biotech, but also great to learn a little bit about you on a personal level. So just want to thank you and thank the audience for listening in. So again, you are the very first guest that I've had who's talking about pharma and biotech and project management in that space. So thank you so much for your insights. I know our audience is going to get a lot from this. I definitely learned a lot from this session. So thank you again, and hope you have a wonderful remainder of the day.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me.
You're so welcome.
Yeah. Bye.
Sat Shri Akal.
That's